So the bank runs have already started. They are well underway. Have you gotten your money out of the bank yet? Let's talk about it. Okay, so for this kind of a presentation, it's very important that I remind you that I am not a financial advisor. Always do your own research before doing anything with your money. All right, so a lot of people out there have been talking about the possibility of another round of bank runs ever since we had the SVB debacle a few months ago. Well, let me tell you something. The bank runs have already started, and you really need to be paying attention to this. And if you haven't started reducing your exposure to your bank, you got to give some really strong consideration right now. Large banks saw over $50 billion in deposit outflows, biggest since July, and small banks, $15 billion in outflows, the biggest since March. Okay, so this is the very recent news about what's been going on with the large banks and the small banks. Now, that news was regarding US-based banks, and there's even more news about US-based banks. Fed's emergency funding facility at a new record high. Who knows what imaginative gifts the clever people at the Equities Building will drop on us today. As people start pulling their deposits out of the bank accounts, these banks, they're in desperate measures. They need liquidity. So they're going to the Fed. They're going to the discount window and any other window that's open in order to borrow money. And so the Federal Reserve came up with this emergency funding facility. And if you look at the chart of that funding facility, it's been going straight up. So these banks, large and small, are desperate. And it's not just U.S. banks. This is a global issue. Let's take a look at this article. Global banks suffer $1.5 trillion in deposit flight in 1 year as JP Morgan Chase and financial giants fight for wealthy clients. So you see what's going on here? JP Morgan and other large banks, they're fighting for the wealthy clients because they need the money. All right, so let's go back to that article. And total deposits at banks in France, Germany, Spain, and Italy, as well as in the Benelux and Nordic regions, dropped by about $950 billion in 12 months, according to data compiled by the S&P Global Market Intelligence, bringing the grand total across the aforementioned countries to $1.5 trillion in deposit flight. As customers pull money out of their banks in search of higher returns, wealthy clients are now doing the most damage to the bottom lines of America's banking giants, according to the new report from Yahoo Finance. JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and Citi all reported deposit outflows in their wealth management divisions in the second quarter of this year. Okay, so it's not just the regular depositor pulling their money out. The wealthy people are pulling their money out. And the wealthy people are usually the smart money. And historically speaking, if you mimic what the smart money does, you're much better off. And there are other clues that the large banks are in serious trouble. Your large banks are starting to close down branches at a staggering rate. I know I've got a Wells Fargo branch right down the road here. They're not only are they shutting down, they're leveling the place. So I'm sure they sold the whole building to some local developer. Bye-bye. Chase Bank is closing 5 locations in the same state as customers warned to make plans to secure their money. So that's one example. So the banks have this liquidity issue with customers pulling their money out of the banks, but there's another problem that they have to worry about. $7.6 trillion of U.S. government debt will mature in the next year, adding pressure on rates. Okay, so when you have $7.6 trillion of government bonds maturing, those are going to have to be replaced at now a higher interest rate, right? Because the vast majority of those bonds were issued when rates were much, much lower. Well, now with interest rates hiked so much, they're going to have to replace those bonds, $7.6 trillion. They're going to have to issue them at a much higher interest rate. I got to tell you, we're coming up into a nightmarish period. You better get your house in order. The next financial crisis is going to make the last financial crisis look like a picnic. Hence, our mantra here, right? Number 1, reduce your exposure to your bank. Number 2, put as much money as you can into gold and silver. That's to preserve your buying power, right? And number 3, establish streams of passive recurring income. So seriously, I know I harp on this a lot, but you have to start getting your money out of the bank. Maybe not all of it, but please reduce your exposure. Now, personally, I keep about 1 month worth of bill paying in the bank. maybe 2 months, but that's it. Everything else I get out of the bank, and I put as much of my cash as I can into gold and silver. I always keep some cash around because, it's just good to have. But in terms of preserving your buying power, you need to put a bunch of your money into gold and silver, because fiat currencies are losing their value every single day. And in the next, big collapse, you're going to want to preserve your buying power. And in the next big crash, not only is gold and silver going to preserve it, but you're probably going to get a nice, profit on it too. And then you got to establish streams of passive recurring income. Inflation is going to continue to go up, and you're going to need to supplement your regular income. So find ways to do it, online, and I can help you with that. Ryan, contact Rob and I. We can help you with that. Ed Anderson, live from Minnesota, signing out.
Copy that.